This is the Seahawkers podcast. I'm Brandon Schultz, and I am joined by my good buddy, Adam Emmert, as we are rolling into the offseason. A new era of Seahawks football without head coach Pete Carroll, but even in his departure, Adam, he's leaving us a couple little nuggets to talk about.
For sure. And we have this entire offseason to get to all of the exciting ideas about changing the coach and what type of coach you want, and of the coaching hires, like which one would you want? And we will certainly get to that. There's just a little bit of postmortem left to do on the Pete Carroll exit here. And it had to do with his interview with Brock and Salk on the final Pete Carroll show. And there was one quote in particular that I found interesting, and I think it was the same one you did. And you said you pulled a clip, so I'm curious if it's the same one. I think it is.
He was on 710 Seattle Sports, and he was talking about just what all went into the decision. And one of the things that I think sparked a lot of interest in the media as a whole were his comments about how he explained the people kind of making the decisions. And here was Pete Carroll talking about the decision makers for the organization.
When you don't have, legitimate dyed-in-the-wool football people calling the shots, then you have to try to make sense of it.
And that was just one, tiny clip. And I do want to get to the larger clip that it came out of, because there is a lot of context. But I think the thing that hit the headlines the most was the idea of referring to Jody Allen and Burt Coldy, who's the vice president, whatever his title is, another one of the decision makers.
He's a Vulcan. That's what he is. He's a Vulcan. He's got pointy ears.
I don't know about the pointy ears part, but I think
ears.
he does
Green
work
blood
for
too.
the company Vulcan,
making
all kinds of stuff up. But and I think the way it was characterized in the media was I don't know. Whenever someone talks about someone within the game of football as not being a football person, I think there's kind of a contentious nature that you kind of put to it. I don't think that was necessarily the case with Pete Carroll, but I do think that there were other things to take away in particular from that comment.
Yeah. And this is Pete's side of the story, right? Like, that's what we're getting here. And there's two sides to every story, and there's always truth in both sides. And, part of the truth in this is that it sounds like it was not somebody who maybe knows football in and out like Pete Carroll does, or say John Schneider does. And that was my big takeaway, is that this wasn't something that John came into Jody and was like, look, we got to get rid of Pete and move on. Like, I'm ready to do something different. I think he wanted to move forward with Pete for at least one more year. That was my big takeaway. I'm curious if yours was the same.
Well, I had the question coming out of the Wednesday press conference. You and I, we did the post-game show, or the post-game, but the post press conference show with Clinton and Phil. And I think there was that question of, was, because of the fact that John Schneider gets to stay and Pete Carroll is the one that goes, was there something going on behind the scenes where John was trying to get Pete Carroll out so he could make it his show, that sort of thing? Because those are types of dynamics within organizations that I think we've all dealt with when it comes to being promoted, right? You wonder if someone, maybe threw you under the bus a little bit, and that's the reason why they're staying and you're going, or vice versa. But it was with that comment, making the comment that it wasn't dyed-in-the-wool football people making the decisions. It leads me to believe that John Schneider probably in the clear.
I would think so too. And especially with the way that he built John up there in the presser, it does feel like this was something from the top and from, the group that is helping Jody run the team here. Seems like a move that also signals that she's going to hold on to the franchise for a bit longer here. Maybe more than a year or two. I'm down with that. That means that for sure we don't have to deal with the drama of somebody buying the team and it getting moved, or something like that. I'm fine with that. The Allens have been very stable owners for the most part. Now, with that said, I don't agree with the way that they're going about this. That's okay. It's happening, and so it's either get on board or just be miserable in your fandom. So we can go down that road here in a minute as well. But there was more to that quote, Brandon. And I think, well, we can get to that in a second. But what this really does remind me of is, for those who don't know, when I was a kid growing up here in Montana, I was a Buffalo Bills fan. Ride or die with them to 4 Super Bowls. Like, it was all in. And then when the Music City Miracle happened in 98, when they played Tennessee in the playoffs, basically the story was this, for those who don't remember, they had 2 quarterbacks, Doug Flutie, who was awesome, got him to that position. They had struggled to make it back to the playoffs after Jim Kelly and that, kind of generation of players was gone. And they also traded for a young, big, tall, prototypical looking quarterback named Rob Johnson, who stunk. And they got to the playoffs, and the owner waded in and made Wade Phillips bench Doug Flutie, and they played Rob Johnson instead. He was a dumpster fire. They lost the game, a dramatic fashion. And it was in that moment that I switched fandoms, because I was just so angry that the ownership had taken the opportunity away from Doug Flutie, who maybe he would never lead you to a Super Bowl. Maybe he wasn't, the prototypical guy, but gosh darn it, he had earned it. He had earned it. And that's how I felt on this last year with Pete, is just like, man, I think he's earned the opportunity to just coach us out one more year, have one more offseason of bringing in some talent on the defensive side of the ball. And it didn't happen. Not that I'm going to trash my Seahawks fandom at this point and jump ship like I did with Buffalo in 1998. But I mean, now we're nearly 45, right, Brandon? So
right.
What were we then? 19. So it's not like I've just, willy-nilly do this sort of thing. But that's what it reminded me of. And yeah, it hurt my feelings as a fan, right?
It comes down to a little bit of a loyalty issue, where you feel like loyalty should lie. And the fact that Pete was under contract for another year, I could, and there's no reason being why you necessarily have to move on. A couple years ago, maybe it made more sense because Pete was coming toward the end of his contract. You had Russell Wilson, and you're thinking, man, if these two can't work together, then you have to move on from one. Maybe you hold on to the quarterback and get rid of your head coach, who, at the time, I mean, we've been through 3 years of Pete Carroll, wondering when it was going to be his time to hang up his football cleats and coaching cleats, maybe. But or what do you call those white Nikes that he wears? There's probably a name for it. I don't know. Monarchs. Yeah. That's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Hang up the Monarchs. But he has the decision made for him here. And one of the things he did on 710 Sports is he went through kind of the decision process and what those meetings were like. And it kind of leads into some of this context that I think that we're getting to with the decision makers. And he talked about how the first thing that they do is they go through the season, talk about what happened, things that they could have done better along the way. And they're trying to do it in a way to really get to the truth of what happened, as opposed to, I think owners and the people in leadership are susceptible to the same types of media opinions that all of us are, whether they're national, whether they're local. And so he talked about how they really try and get to those opinions before they kind of move on to some of the more challenging stuff.
The initial part of it is trying to get at the essence of it. And then, okay, what is the essence of the adjustments that are necessary? And that's where the, maybe don't see eye to eye on, because I see it one way, and I think I got a way to fix it, and I'm not going to kind of halfway fix it. I'm trying to fix it so it's perfect. So I've got real precise and specific thoughts, and they may not see it that way. They may not agree with it. They may not see that that's the right answer, or that's not the answer that makes them feel good. And the difficult part, if you guys could know, it's really hard because they're not football people, they're not coaches. And so to get to the real details of it, it's really difficult for other people. It's difficult for me to convey stuff to you guys. Mm-hmm. And as much broth as you have in your background, there's times when, I kind of shrug my shoulders. Okay, that's as far as we got. And, I can't take you any farther in this time frame we have. And mm-hmm. You're going to understand it that way, and we're going to see it another way. And we're not going to see eye to eye. That's basically just common, dynamics, and that you deal with.
One area where I noticed a similar dynamic to this, when you have people that are talking different languages and about whatever game or sport that they're a part of. I was listening to 2 poker people talk about poker and how the dynamics were going around a poker table of a particular match. And the language that they use was a completely different language. So even though, we watch a lot of football, when a play call comes in and what exactly that means and what the defense, how to defend a certain play. There's a lot of language that goes into that it just doesn't get talked about in general media circles, because most of us who watch the game aren't, in the game football people.
Very true. And shoot, if I were to sit down and talk to, let's think of one of the worst coaches of all time, like Urban Meyer, about football, right?
Yeah.
Okay. We're terrible at the NFL level, no doubt about it. But if we were to talk football, he would talk so far over my head in just knowledge that I couldn't keep up with the vocabulary and everything that he's talking about there. But as a relatively seasoned fan, as I think we both are, and pay attention to the game, I think if you can get it into layman's terms, like we understand the nuts and bolts of it. And I have no idea how much football Jody Allen watched before she inherited the ownership from Paul. Like, who knows? Like, so there has to be some sort of disconnect there. It's hard to communicate those things, in especially with other factors at play kind of swirling around in the ether of this team over the last couple of years. Well, really, since I don't know, maybe 18, 19, it seems like there's different opinions as to how this team should be run.
Right.
And Pete alludes to it in his answer here, but I think one thing that we're not getting in Pete's side of the story here is the results part of it, right? You and I had talked before, Brandon, and you brought up, one of the things that had bothered you, and you were like, look, if you're going to move on from Pete, this is an argument that makes sense to me, is getting swept by the Rams, swept by the Niners. Like that right there, that's a fireable offense in many ways, right? The defense really cratering these last 2 years. It hadn't been bad for 7 years, people. Go look it up. It's been mediocre somewhere in there. Let's not twist the narratives, but 2 years, absolute dumpster fires, getting lapped by McVay in Shanahan. I mean, there's some results in here that could lead you to this decision for sure.
Well, let's have that quote in context from Pete Carroll as he's explaining, the kind of difficulty that it is in trying to make this work in terms of the discussion.
I knew that we were going to be challenged, because every year it feels like that. Every year it feels like that you're going to be challenged, and you're challenged by opinions that are kind of media opinions, because what else do people have when you're outside of the game? How could you know other than what you guys talk about on the radios and what the articles say and what the pundits are drawing conclusions on? That's so you have to go in realizing that that's what you're dealing with, and then try to talk through to get to the essence of stuff. So that's always going to be a challenge, because when you don't have legitimate dyed-in-the-wool football people calling the shots, then you have to try to make sense of it, just like we try to make sense of it for your audience. It's no different, And in these meetings, these are wide open now.
There's one question. Hearing the quote in the full context, I do wonder how many owners are actually dyed-in-the-wool football people. Like, this has to be a challenge for every coach, every season, all the time, because all the owners, they only know what they know based on whatever meetings they have internally and then media opinions.
100%. I mean, I don't know one current owner who you would say would be dyed-in-the-wool football people. I mean, maybe the closest would be Jerry Jones.
Jerry Jones, yeah.
That has its own pitfalls, right? Like we saw what happened to the Cowboys here on Super Wildcard Weekend. I can understand that.
Maybe Mark Davis down in Las Vegas because he grew up around it.
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier, there's truth on both sides here. So we talked about the accountability for some of the results, right? And I do think he could have gotten some of that turned around. But now here's some of Pete's side of the story, talking about how the media may influence some of these owners and things like that. Brandon, do you believe that some of the negative media towards Pete affected this decision?
Oh, for sure. I think that it's hard for it not to. It's just trying to determine what exactly that is. So
I know exactly what that is, man. I know
well,
exactly.
I mean, I have a
Yeah.
few ideas, but I feel like it's hard to also, I think, break out the criticism from the pitchforks and torches.
Right.
And some of those, because some of those things get blurred, where you have criticism year after year, um, and I think some of that bleeds into too. It's not just the media perspective. I think they also have some of those internal results. I know as a season ticket holder, I get a questionnaire every year where it's like asking, where do how do you feel like the direction of the team is and or is going, or what's the game day experience like? So they have some of these internal results too that probably inform ownership to say, here's how fans really think, the ones that are actually paying for tickets and showing up to the game or not showing up to the game in the case of the Steelers game late in the year. They have these opinions, and if they're basing it from a business perspective, like if these people aren't happy with the decision or with the direction of the team, and you're seeing that year after year, and your season ticket list of people who are on the wait list keeps shrinking and shrinking, I think they kind of like to have that big list of people waiting for season tickets. And as that starts to shrink, yes, it's a good thing for the people that are on the list, but I think for the people who are looking at it from a business perspective, maybe not so much.
You're telling me that if Pete Carroll would have stayed on one more year, like this is from, the mindset of like maybe all the surveys were bad.
Yeah.
Okay. That one more year of Pete Carroll would have caused all the people to get rid of their season tickets, or a mass part of no, it wouldn't have happened, especially if he would have come back, added a couple pieces to the front seven, changed defensive quarter, get rid of the 3-4, go back to the scheme. I almost guarantee you it would have been at least a mediocre defense. I know a lot of people think it was impossible. I don't think that. But if that had gone down, even if they would have gone up in flames the next year with Pete Carroll, people are giving up their season tickets. It was so hard to get them to begin with. Like, what? Because one more year, max 2 of basically still winning 8, 9, 10 games. Oh, my stars, the torture. Like, I find that a bit preposterous.
I think it's more of a 2-3 year trend type thing, as opposed to worrying about you're going to fall off a cliff type thing. But I'm saying
Right.
it's
So
a point in it. It's
Where's
not
the
the
fire?
entire thing.
Yeah, where's the fire? What's the hurry? Like,
Yeah.
I've never understood this. Like, we gotta hurry up and do this to get the clock moving forward, to get going faster, to blah 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 blah. Like, why? What? Seriously, like, I don't understand. What aging quarterback are we wasting? What Justin Herbert are we wasting in their prime? Like, I just didn't understand it. And I think the loudest voices that did creep into this decision were from that portion of the fandom that everybody knows that frustrates me. Like, let Russ Cookers, fire Pete, BPOA is the way to go. Draft a quarterback every year, even though it wouldn't make sense, maybe. Yada, yada, yada. And, their track record proves out how it proves out. Mine proves out how it proves out. But at the end of the
Adam
day,
hates memes. In short, Adam does not like the memes. So let Russ Cook became a meme. Pete's too old became a meme. Let's see what else to add on the pile.
The memes aren't the problem. It's the fundamental philosophy of soft air raid football, and you got to have a guy that throws it all the time, runnings for losers, all that stuff. Yeah. And really, the thing is that portion has been really the loudest portion of the fan base, and I genuinely believe it's like a 30% minority. And I do think that trickled back into Jody's ear, in the Vulcan's ear, and I think it made a difference at the end of the day when they let Pete go. So I do hold that part of the fan base, slightly responsible. Again, there's also results that Pete has to contend with. There's also, the idea of, someday you do move on, and he is getting older, that you have to contend with. But yeah, I think it played a factor, and it does. It bothers me. It really does, because it does feel like disloyal, short-term type thinking.
And it is also moving forward, looking ahead type thinking, because Pete did have 1 year left on his contract, and you're thinking, if are we going to have to re-sign Pete in another year, or are we going to then move on? At some point, you're going to have to make a decision. So we've talked about it many other times too, and kind of propping up the way that Belichick did it with some of his players. Sometimes it's better to move on a year early than a year late. I don't know if it's the case in terms of coaching, because I think there is potential fallout that you have to worry about moving on from a coach who's beloved within the organization. And so that part of it, I do have to worry about too. But at the same time, I'm happy that it sounds like Pete Carroll was kind of a part, at least was good with it in a way that he's moving on. And he even described how he helped with Jody Allen explain kind of some of the next steps when it came to hiring a replacement and what it would take to move on from a head coach.
It was very intense, and really crucial. That it was crucial to me that I was able to express, my thoughts and my feelings about it, and my concerns about moving forward, and trying to help as much as possible to make it, to bring clarity to the decision making and what to expect and all of that. It was I was really pleased that we had the intensity of it, because it needed it, and also the depth that we went to, so to make sure that Jody could feel what this is and what it takes, and what the expectations that come along with this job and these decisions that you make, and how difficult it is to do this well and to do it right. It's hard to do the coaching job well. It's hard to do the selection process well, to get the right guys to answer the call. So, and because we care so much, because we all care so much, it was really intense, and it wasn't uncomfortable at any time. It was just, we need to get to it. And we were able to do that.
And they're going to be getting to it here pretty soon, if not already.
They are. I think another factor that really plays a big part in this is that there are so many quality candidates available to hire for a head coach this year. Like, it really is a bumper year in that way. And, we'll have discussions. If Phil wants to do a show and talk a little bit about some of those preferences, what you'd like in a coach. And he's got some great suggestions. I'm really looking forward to doing that. And whether it's offensive or defensive or young or old or experienced or not, or however you want to look at it, I don't really care. There's 6, 7, 8 guys that you could choose from. None of them are wrong choices. Like, at this point, a guy's going to either sink or swim. Like, eventually, all of them might fail for all I know. All of them might succeed for all I know. I have no idea. But at this point in time, there's just a certain amount of risk. You roll the dice on any of these dudes, but there's 6 or 7 dudes that it's like, okay, you hired that guy. Great. That's the direction we're going. Let's give it a try. And so, not a lot of wrong answers out there, I don't think.
No, I'm just kind of excited to get to the point of finding out which coach then we're going to be getting behind next, in terms of, hey, this is our guy. Let's move forward. Let's win with this coach. Or, I don't know, maybe if your goals are different, let's lose with this coach and accumulate draft picks over the years. That could be the potential too. I have a hard time thinking that in a Pete Carroll, post Pete Carroll era, a John Schneider era, that they're going to go for anybody who just doesn't want to win, though.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if it's a tear it down situation, or they think we're close and could just add a couple of pieces, and with a new voice in the locker room, it'll be that difference to put you over the hump. Maybe it's going to be really interesting to see. And look, I didn't vote for this. I wanted to keep Pete, but whoever comes in next, much like president, man, like whether you voted for him or not, that's your president. Same thing here, man. Like this is my president.
Yes, we want success.
Yeah, and I want to root for them to succeed. I want whatever their vision is to succeed, and we'll go from there. And yeah, again, an entire offseason to speak on it, but I am excited, man, because there's, like I was alluding to, a lot of quality dudes that you can get behind.
Well, thanks to everybody who tuned in. And I think, with the point of this discussion, I don't think that there's any animosity or any kind of ill will toward that football people comment. It's just Pete Carroll in his own way explaining how they have to try and make this work in terms of the conversation, and him having kind of that high level football IQ and trying to communicate to people who haven't, they don't have that same type of football knowledge, and trying to make that work.
Couldn't have it because they didn't spend their life in in the NFL, right?
That's right. So, hey, if you like this discussion, I think Adam and I, we've talked about maybe doing more topic-oriented shows throughout the off season. So if this is something that you're into, let us know. Hit the like button on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, do all that. Shoot us an email at gohawks@seahawkerspodcast.com, especially if you have some topics that, hey, maybe you want us to do a little bit of a deep dive into.
Yeah, we'd be happy to do that. So yeah, we're kind of playing with the idea. More long form shows, every other week or so throughout the off season, or, more of these little 15 to 30 minute, jobs that are, more just single topic based. Maybe that's more effective. I know it'd be in some ways easier for us because, doing a long show throughout the off season, man, it's hard to find something to talk about for an hour and a half in a lot of ways. So,
and a lot of these you can throw on the camera, talk about it as soon as they come up. So something to think about here as we go in through the off season. Really want to thank everybody continuing on and listening to the show, supporting us. And I think with that, Adam,
there's only one thing left to say.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.